here for this. No, I'm kidding. It was extremely well attended. I think it was well received, so take you through it, and let's see how this goes. George, is it up arrow or down? Hopefully. You got it. Good job. So this is a combination of slides. The slides that some of the slides were used in some of the town hall work that was done. There's a couple things I'm passionate about that I added into this. And then there's a couple slides at the end that the Breakfast Club didn't get to see that you will hopefully enjoy, and then we can get some council discussion and public comments, and hopefully we're all still standing. So this will share a semi-clear picture of where the city stands today. Talk about priorities, and then of course for public comment here directly from residents. What makes us unique? I think we take this in some cases for granted, and I think we know it, but it's worth repeating. We are primarily and always have been a residential community. It was originally intended to have more commercial than it even currently does, and so that revenue is limited. And being where we are and what our expectations are, we have high expectations for safety, services, and infrastructure. We enjoy strong property values and thoroughly enjoy our quality of life. So what core services do we expect? Some of this is obvious, but much of it comes from relatively recent polling that was done. Obviously, we want fast 911 emergency response times. We want police and fire protection. Wildfire prevention and weed abatement, even more so now after what we've watched and witnessed relative to the Palisades fire, as well as the Altadena disasters. And it goes without saying that we want well-maintained streets, sewers, and facilities. This graph has been pasted and presented, many times from, at least while I've been around watching it, from the FAC, the Financial Advisory Committee, to, numerous presentations from various finance directors, city managers, and councils. It's sort of, various things have escalated, some as expected, some higher than inflation, and more recently we've had to use reserves to bridge that gap. Where the money comes from and where it goes. Another one that's shown over and over again are the overarching theme being that property tax and parcel taxes on that graph make up 73%. Concessions, in particular the golf club, provide a significant revenue source, and then there's the balance. Where it goes, obviously heavily into public safety, including police and fire and public works, and the balance of operations and community development. It should be noted that quite a bit of the community development number is billed back on a rate schedule and reimbursed. Sort of what I just said here, but I think the comment about few alternative revenue streams stands. We've looked at various things over time. Our revenues are limited on commercial, and even the other opportunities are, on a percentage basis, small. Property tax constraints. Proposition 13 for residents is a wonderful thing. It controls and allows many of us to continue to be able to live here, and it limits our upward growth. I think the challenge is, and you'll see on this and following slides, that PVE receives about 11% of each property tax dollar. And many residents will say when they're not so familiar with the situation, they'll look at it and they'll say, well, geez, I just paid an X $1,000 property tax bill. What do you mean the city's challenged? And the answer is a combination of the 11% and how we ended up contracting for fire services, not picking on the guy in the room, and how that's arranged. And it occurred as a result of becoming a contract city, as a result of having originally our own fire department. You can see the comparative cities. There's a delta in the fact that they are in a district and they have fire covered and then receive the balance of revenue, whereas we receive the revenue and then have to keep up with and pay for the contract that's provided to us. So what is current Measure E? It generates approximately $5.1 million annually, funds a portion of police services, and that is coming up for expiration. Note the comment at the bottom where collections continue through fiscal year 26-27 with final bills issued November and February. So whether we have Measure E or we don't, expenses outpace revenues. We will have challenges either way. Without it, the challenges obviously will be much greater. And when we talk about what's in it, what's not in it, we tend to talk a lot about operational expenses. And the last comment there to the right, deferred maintenance continues to grow because it's really not directly measured. You can look at and estimate depreciation, for example, but that doesn't come directly back in. Welcome. Rising cost pressures. I think we've said all this. Two things to add. Technology systems are lagging behind. We've done a lot of work to get much of the server infrastructure and systems out of the disaster room that's downstairs in this building and move those to the cloud. Some of it can't go because of public safety restrictions. One thing that we haven't been able to address is the system that's currently running accounting and ERP. Yeah? Fortunately, we see it. It's only blinking on you. You're good. Pension obligations. There's further slides on that coming, so I'll keep going. Here we are. So where are we today? As measured by CalPERS, our UAL is approximately $20 million. It's increased by several million dollars. The net result of that is that the annual payments continue to increase. When I first started closely looking at this, they were about $800,000 a year. Now they're approaching $2 million annually. So in simple math, avoiding all the actuarial magic, that's $1.2 million a year that you all don't get to spend on something else. So how do we get it under control? We can't just meet the obligations that they tell us to meet and materially reduce the debt. If we're required today to pay a $2 million payment and we're watching our debt escalate via a variety of sources, whether it's GovInvest or whatever they call it today, or others looking at the math, it's in the neighborhood of $1.x million that we're going to need to pay per year to start pushing those funded ratios to exceed 90%. And when I say that, I mean fully funded plans dropping the UAL, which then ultimately reduces pressure on the general fund and those recurring payments. Some like to call this, sort of like paying down a mortgage. It really isn't exactly the same because of the actuarial science, or actuarial art more than science. But the bottom line is we need to catch it. In the time period that at least 3 of us sitting up here have been elected, we've thrown about $2 million extra at this. That has not been enough. It's helped, but it's not been enough to push the trajectory downward. What else? We have capital needs. Meeting after meeting, we hear about CIP, we hear about storm drains, challenges with road maintenance. Some of it's funded with local measures, but there's others that remain. City facilities become a hot button. Whether it's repair very aging things that are in the building in order to just hold it together, do something different, I don't know, but it's a challenge. Trails, trees, open space. 28% of our city is beautiful parkland. We have trails. We have, continuing increasing costs. We have, preferences around what we do or don't want to use relative to pesticides, and those choices and those decisions cost money. Public safety investments. We hear repeatedly that we want our police department maintained. We want fast emergency response time, whether it's police or fire. We want emergency preparedness and readiness. So what's happening today? This top one is a hot button. When for some reason when people say it, you know, the city workforce was reduced, and you know, how did you do that? What do you mean by that? Well, I have it on the next couple slides. I'll share it. Deferred repairs and maintenance we've talked about, and we're now into the period where we're using reserves to quote unquote balance a structurally imbalanced and now cash deficit budget. Predicted, occurring, here we are. Some contractual expenditures were reduced, many others increased due to inflation and other choices. And in the 2021/2 period, ARPA, which was federal grants that federal that flew through the state, grants that came to the city as a result of the COVID period, and reimbursements of about $3 million offset some of the gaps and challenges at the time in our budget. So here's what staffing looks like in the city over time. And it's interesting, if you look at the 16-17 period when things were operating quote unquote normally, there were 63 point, I don't know where they get the point to, obviously a part-time employee. I want to see a person shaved.
Part-time.
Yeah, I want to see a person shaved into 0.2 and see what that looks like. Anyway, 63 plus or minus. And then gradually, as a result of the Measure D failure, the passage of E, you know, constant attempt to squeeze, we end up in the 54 range, and then pretty consistently have vacancies of 7 to 8 on the right, as you can see. So the city's operating consistently with about 47 employees and contractors as opposed to the 63 that it once had. So in practice, what happened? The councils and police department went through 2 pretty significant studies that reduced staffing. I'm not going to sit and read every single position up there, but every bullet point that's on that list, however you feel about it or you don't, the department's operating without. Public works and maintenance are largely unchanged since 2017. There was one position that is noted as being changed prior to 2015. That said, that last comment, and those that were paying attention saw it in our budget challenges. Tree maintenance services are underfunded. We cut it, we put it back. It probably needs more, but that's the story. So here is that exact example. We reduced funding to try and squeeze out some of the deficit, and even a desire to keep up with and trim trees. We couldn't even get to some of that. We were having challenges funding emergency tree trimming. And so we were pressed to return those to prior levels to an absolute minimum, which we approved. So what happens if nothing changes? I'm not a big fan of the fear slide. If you don't do this, that'll happen. I think people are intelligent adults. Our residents are very smart. They understand what's going to happen if things aren't funded. We'll have to make choices. The challenge is that when sales can't increase, it's not a business, right? So when funding is eliminated or reduced, hard choices need to be had, and it is what it is. What's the community want from surveys? Reducing fire risk, it's rather obvious, comes back over and over again. There's a current effort with 2 RFPs to seek greater use of goats and natural sources. That's on the street. We're expecting it back. Obviously, maintaining fire protection services, one of the items on the agenda tonight. Helping prevent thefts and home burglaries. Some of those numbers have gone in the right direction. Hopefully that'll continue. Requiring that all funds be utilized locally is a huge priority. Maintaining the city's financial stability. I think that means different things to different people. The bottom line is we need to operate a balanced budget. We need to control debt and make wise decisions. How those pucks get moved around on the board, one way or another, we need to maintain financial stability. Maintaining 911 response time, public safety, and wildfires. So what's the current process? What's the role of the city? And geez, guys, why aren't you talking about some of this up there, or what are you saying or not saying up there? There is a citizen-led initiative that is presently underway. Those signatures that are required for that have been submitted to the city clerk and have been forwarded to the county, and they are under review. While that's going on, we're limited to sharing sort of what you're seeing up here. Facts, data, financial impacts. You don't see us talking about what's proposed, how the funds would be utilized, et cetera, because by law, the city cannot advocate for or against that effort. I'd love to say about 3 more paragraphs, and I'm going to stop there. Residents will determine the passage of the measure at the ballot box. So what's next? Continued public engagement. Another look at the long-term financial planning forecast in collaboration with the FAC. We've gone through and caught up with audits, and so as of the last meeting, we had that done. That's good to see. And then evaluating sustainable options one way or another and listening to community feedback, some of which we'll do shortly. So that was the end of the Breakfast Club presentation. And what I thought might be interesting and helpful was I went back to staff and said, hey, you know, look, we were elected 18, 19 range. Let's compare what's changed, because inevitably everybody's going to look at it and say, well, geez, Measure E was X, what do you need? And so, again, reminding you that we're talking operational expense here. We're not covering pensions. We're not dealing with capital infrastructure, any of that. I just wanted to compare side by side what some of this looks like. So the police department went from 7.1 to 8.2, even with reduced staffing. Fire contract up $2.2 million. CalPERS payment, and depending on when you measure it, it's either 800 or 524. This 524 goes back a little further in time. But either way, there's a 7-figure, delta there. Big increases in landscape maintenance and fire safety weed abatement. The fire safety weed abatement contract actually the year before this was even higher. So right there is a difference that you can see the math that's coming on the next slide. No capital, no pensions. There it is. So that was that. There were a lot more jokes and comedy in the presentation at the Breakfast Club than there was tonight. This was a little bit more serious. And they were all of good humor, and so there it is. Typically, it's posted on the website. I wanted to actually re-give it so that you could see it